Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I've lived in my house for over 15 years now and never had any issues with the neighbors. Everyone pretty much kept to themselves, but were still friendly enough to wave or say hello. The vacant lot next to my home had just been purchased recently. I was looking forward to finally having a new neighbor after all this time. Boy, was I wrong about that being a good thing. The new owner moved in and right away started renovations on the property. I could hear construction sounds as they worked on the interior of the home itself. That was none of my business, so I left them alone to do their work. It wasn't until I looked out my kitchen window one morning that I saw the massive shed they had built literally right on the edge of my property. My fence was still intact and clearly marked where my land ended, yet this monstrosity of a shed was leaning right up against it, clearly crossing over onto my yard. I threw on some shoes and marched right over there to figure out what was going on. I pounded on the front door until the new neighbor answered. He was a man in his 40s and looked annoyed that I interrupted his breakfast. "Can I help you with something?" he asked in an irritated tone. "Yes, you can tell me why you built a shed on my property without even speaking to me first," I told him bluntly. He rolled his eyes dramatically. "That shed is very clearly on my land. The builders assured me they knew exactly where my property ended. Maybe get your own land surveyed if you don't even know where it ends." Now it was my turn to get aggravated with his dismissive attitude. "I lived here for 15 years and know exactly where my property ends. That shed is on my land," I argued. He held up a hand to silence me. "I just moved in and the shed is already built. I don't have time for any dramatics from my new neighbor. The shed won't be moved, so I suggest you get off my property before I call the police." With that, he slammed the door in my face. I was fuming at his audacity to speak down to me like some misbehaving child. There was no way I was letting him get away with this. I may not have been ready to immediately call the police over this, but I refused to back down. Over the next week, I sent several written requests, asking him to move his shed back onto his own property. He responded to exactly none of them. I even had a property survey done that clearly showed the shed over the line. Still, he ignored me any time I attempted contact. Eventually, I realized he was never going to willingly move it. I decided to take matters into my own hands before this became a legal issue. One morning, I borrowed my brother's tools and began the process of dismantling the shed. I wanted to do it as quietly and cleanly as possible. That thought went right out the window when the neighbor came barreling out of his house screaming at me. "What the hell do you think you're doing to my shed? Get away from there!" he yelled. I kept my voice calm. "I'm simply removing the part that is on my property. You refused to after many requests." That only angered him more as he got right in my face. "I told you to stay away from here. This is still my shed and my property." At this point, he pulled out his phone and threatened to call the police on me. I knew he was only doing it as an intimidation tactic, so I continued trying to remove pieces of the shed. Soon I heard the sirens blaring as not one but 3 police cars pulled up. A pair of officers approached me while the others spoke to the still outraged neighbor. "Want to tell me what's going on here?" the officer questioned. I quickly explained about the shed being built over the property line without my permission, and that I had tried resolving it peacefully only to be ignored. The neighbor, of course, argued that I was destroying his brand new shed for no reason. The police got both of our sides of the story, and then took a look at where the shed was placed. After examining the property line and my survey, they determined a portion of the shed did cross over. "She has every right to remove any part on her own property," the officer told the neighbor firmly. It gave me great satisfaction seeing the stunned look on his face at this confirmation I was right. He tried to protest, but they shut him down quickly. "This is easily resolved by you moving the shed entirely onto your own property. Since you declined her requests, she has the right to remove the part on her land." He scoffed and tried to argue more, but the police would not hear it. They made sure he understood that he needed to move his shed immediately or face charges for illegal construction on someone else's property. With no way left to fight it, he stormed off inside. The police advised me that if he did not move the shed in the next couple of days, to file a formal report against him. I thanked them for the help, and they left feeling like I had won a major victory. The very next day, the neighbor had a construction crew over to completely relocate the shed just a few feet over onto his own land. I watched happily as he had to pay extra for this mistake. Served him right for being so nasty when I was only looking out for my own rights and property. He shot me dirty looks the few times I saw him after that. I had a feeling he was embarrassed by the whole ordeal. Not only was he proven wrong, but he now had police and legal threats looming over his head if he tried anything else. I, however, slept very soundly now that the shed was properly placed out of my yard. It felt nice taking a stand and not backing down when I was clearly right from the beginning. After a couple more weeks, he approached me in a much calmer manner and actually apologized. He admitted he thought the rules and property lines worked differently here. Apparently, where he moved from, those things were much more relaxed. He did ask if we could be friendly again now that the drama was over. I accepted his apology and told him I didn't hold grudges. Maybe he was only trying to save face, but I figured we still had to live next to each other. No use staying enemies over one argument. Things remained peaceful after that. He learned his lesson on how property laws actually work here, and I realized he can be an okay neighbor when he's not trying to claim parts of my land. We may never be best friends after the rough start, but cordial waves across the fence make for a perfect relationship in my eyes. I'm just relieved I stood my ground when I was clearly right. It wasn't always easy, but the shed issue taught me to be firm but fair with defending my property. After seeing how quick that neighbor was to steamroll me at first, it will definitely help me in the future. I can only hope any other new neighbors that move in don't need to learn similar lessons about boundaries. But if they do, I will be ready and waiting to stand my ground. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Just found out about this subreddit and had to share this story. The initial reason for the revenge happened in 2013, but the revenge only happened in 2017. I'll keep everything vague as not to be recognized. For context, back in 2013, I was a graduate student pursuing my master's degree. That was my last year in the program. We had 24 months to finish all the work and the dissertation. My advisor was a professor who was very well known and experienced in my field of work. Let's call her Janet. Fake name. Janet and I had worked together with research since my college days, as I became part of an undergraduate research with her. At that point, we had been working for about 4 years, and as any advisor-student relationship, we had our disagreements quite often. Janet was used to doing her experiments in a certain archaic way. I knew there were better uses of our grant's money, and always tried to push toward a more advanced method, especially correlating data collection and statistics. However, our relationship was always good. I knew her husband and had been to her house numerous times. She was a little set in her ways, but we managed to make good progress in our field. Anyhow, by the end of 2013, I presented my dissertation to the department and was approved with flying colors. My data still wasn't published in any paper, as I wanted to have more analysis in different areas to make a more robust and better paper. With that said, my dissertation was published, and by all reasons, that is my work and my experiments. After I got my MS, I decided to pursue a PhD. While I was still going to work in the same field, I wanted to use different techniques and thus talked with Janet about going to pursue a PhD under a different professor at another university. She always encouraged me to do better and look for ways to diversify my views. I went ahead and contacted a professor outside my country in another university to pursue my PhD. I got approved and soon moved away. For the next 2 years, I still kept contact with Janet, but on the third, she stopped responding. Initially, I thought she had changed her email or something, but didn't think much of it. Time flew by, and in 2017, while reading papers and writing my own, I came across a paper that was strangely similar to my research. Interested in it, I opened it up to read. To my shock, it was a paper by my ex-advisor. She was listed as the advisor, and another guy, who from his curriculum is her current master's student. Reading the title, I thought, hey, that's neat. She continued researching it. But boy, I was wrong. Reading the paper, I got increasingly angry. That wasn't a new research. It was my research. My data was all in that paper, even my graphs and tables. Initially, I thought, oh well, she's also an author, and if she is citing it, there shouldn't be a problem. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. My name was nowhere near that paper as they claimed that research as original. Now, I was livid. I sent an email to Janet confronting her, which was never replied to. However, I am not a pushover, and I will never allow people to claim my own work as theirs. She made a mistake by using my data. I'm a researcher, and I keep everything I ever worked on saved on external SSDs, encrypted and in my own possession, all cataloged with date entries, and I even had my own dissertation to prove my work. In my country, research is financed by governmental grants. I wrote an email to the dean of the grants institution, explaining the whole situation with proof of everything. I also sent an email to the journal in which that was published, contesting their paper and explaining everything. It didn't take longer than 15 days for me to get a follow-up. The institution responsible for the grant was furious. They cut all financial aid for her and her student and made a formal requirement to the university, requesting her immediate termination. The journal retracted the paper and is now suing her for plagiarism. Now, after all these years, I learned that she was indeed fired and hasn't been able to work in the field ever since. I never met her again and have no intention of ever doing so. Now my work is published, and I'm recognized for my contributions in the field. Maybe that was a petty thing to do, but I couldn't allow people to get away with claiming my work as theirs. Edit. Wow, didn't expect so many replies. Thank you for the words. A few things. The only reason I said it was petty is that since she is also an author, she has the right to publish it. But she needed to include me on the paper, which she didn't do. Also, there are laws in place in my country that allow the journal to sue her. This is not an international journal, that's why that happened. I work with medical research for those who asked, but I can't share the paper as that would easily identify me. Another thing, people have been questioning my terms. In my country, a master's candidate needs to present a dissertation, and a PhD candidate needs to present a thesis. Sorry if I wasn't clear enough. Cheers. The next one is a petty revenge story. This happened about 10 years ago. There was a Karen who had been with the company for nearly 15 years. Her title was project manager, but she was really more of an office admin, and various internal projects would get pushed to her. These were things to help improve how the office worked, but nothing critical. One of these projects was actually deemed important, and it was reassigned to me. She hated this and stonewalled me all the time. It caused the project to be delayed, and I was getting criticism from some of the executives because of this. When I commented that it was difficult to get information from Karen, she became super sweet and said she was bending over backwards to help me. I didn't understand the project, etc. I powered through anyway, but then there was a round of layoffs, and she was one of them. Due to her time with the company, she received a 3-month severance and extended benefits. It was weird, but the company essentially cut monthly severance checks instead of paying them out all at once. But she also had to sign an NDA and non-disparagement agreement on the exit, as well as confirm that she had handed over all company materials and files. I went to grab some files related to the project, and everything was gone. Karen had deleted everything. This was before using things like Teams, Google Drive, etc. Everything was on a shared network drive, so it wasn't super easy to get the backup. But Boomer Karen was the type that used her work email for all her personal accounts, including LinkedIn. It was also company policy that the emails of departed employees would be forwarded to their department heads for a few months. Using this knowledge, I went to LinkedIn and sent a message. Hi Karen, I heard about your departure. I hope you can use the time to take the vacation you talked about. I went to grab some of the files but noticed they were missing. Do you have backups you could share? When she responded, it also went to her old email, and thus to the department head. Don't pretend to be nice. I wouldn't be surprised if you helped me get fired. Good luck finding any of those files. I deleted everything, screw you. Well, when that got forwarded to HR that she had put in writing that she had deleted everything, it was determined that this violated the severance agreement. All severance checks were immediately stopped. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I was at a sports bar watching UFC fights on a Saturday afternoon. It was pretty dead until around 5 when the early dinner crowd started arriving. One family came in and asked their waitress if they could switch the large projector screen from the fights. She came over and asked me, and I said it was fine as long as they put the fights on another TV. The family had the main TV switched to ESPN, which had one of their special documentaries on at that time rather than live sports. Then the family asked if they could switch the smaller TV that I had just had switched to the fights. The waitress said no since they'd already requested another TV. The family was annoyed and asked for the manager. When the manager got to their table, the father demanded that the fights be changed, so their son, who was probably around 8, couldn't see the fights since they were violent and not family-friendly. The manager tried to calm the family by moving the fights to a TV behind their son, which I would have been fine with. However, the father demanded that the fights couldn't be on any TV as long as the family was at the sports bar. Then he accused the manager of not caring about young children for insisting that the fights remain on somewhere. The manager nodded and said he'd get the TV sorted out. Then he also asked the father if he should change the music playing since it was pop. The father grunted about that being nice, and how the manager was finally being responsible and looking out for children. While this was happening, the manager sent the family's waitress over to put their order in. Once their order was in the system, the manager switched the TV again. He put the UFC fights back on the main TV, but this time he turned the sound on as well, since the pop music could be bad for children. The father started loudly complaining again and called the manager back over. He demanded that the TV be changed again, and when the manager said no, the father demanded to speak to the owner. The manager said he'd get the owner, but it might take a few minutes. The manager changed into a sport coat and came back over. It turned out he was a part owner of the sports bar. Now the father really lost it and said his family was leaving. The owner calmly asked if he should have the family's meals changed to takeout orders. The father said they were leaving and wouldn't pay for the food the family had ordered. The owner said the family had to pay for their meals since they were already being cooked. The father continued arguing until the owner threatened to call the cops if they left without paying. The family ended up paying but left when their food came several minutes later. Until they left, the father made the son sit there with his eyes closed and ears covered so he wasn't exposed to the fight. I busted out laughing once the family left. The next one is an entitled people story. So the other day at my job, a museum, I was on the welcoming team duty. Basically, we welcome people at the entrance, check tickets, answer general questions, and give directions. I was there with 2 colleagues. A little detail that's important later. We have radios and headsets to communicate with one another and our supervisors when we have to share important information like, okay, there's a man with a service dog, papers are in order. Usually with that one, we gush over how cute the doggo is over the radio. So that day, I was welcoming visitors when this woman walks in. I go to welcome her and ask if she already has her ticket to scan it. I say hi in my overly chipper customer service voice as I approach and ask for the ticket. She doesn't say hi to me. She just stops and gives me this once-over look and stares at me very intently. She stares at my face and says to me, "Seriously? You work in a museum and you come here looking like a slut?" She was referring to my makeup. I have a uniform, but it's really dark and dull, and I look more goth than Wednesday Addams in it. We can't dye our hair, but there's no rule about makeup. So I tend to do very colorful, bright eye makeup with glitter and shiny eyeliner because I like color. It was the first time anyone said anything negative about my makeup style. I kind of froze because sure, sometimes people complain about stuff, but to have someone walk in and the first thing they say is a personal insult, that's a first. So I tell her that no one at the museum ever objected. If anything, people love my crazy makeups, and they even give me challenges like finding a way to combine odd colors and make it look cool, and that there's no rule about makeup while looking at my 2 colleagues for backup. They were standing by and listening to the exchange. I see one of them with their hand on the microphone, ready to ask for help. Gosh, I love them. The lady continues, "It doesn't matter. You should know better when you work for a prestigious institution than to come here looking like some slutty drag queen. Gosh, you millennials, not even my generation, but whatever lady, have absolutely no class or respect whatsoever. I want to see a responsible person. This is unacceptable." So I get a hold of the microphone and ask for a supervisor to come down to the entrance right away because someone wants to speak with them. One of them says they're on their way but asks what is going on, and I answer honestly, "There's a lady who said I look like a slut and that I shouldn't come to work looking like that." There's a second of silence, and they ask if the woman really said that to me. My coworkers talk into the radio, and they say that indeed, that's what she said. What my supervisor asked me to do then, I think I will remember forever. They tell me to remove my headset and hold the radio to the woman's face, which I do. Then through the radio, they tell that rude lady, "Our museum does not tolerate any rude, insulting, or threatening behaviors towards our employees. Leave now, or the next person you shall speak to will be the head of security." Her face went completely white, just complete shock. And she did end up speaking with security and was escorted out, swearing she would sue us to non-existence. Just her face when she heard that message through the radio. That scene will live in my brain forever. The next one is an entitled parent story. Our household always revolved around money, even though my mom made more than enough money and we were not struggling by any means. She complained about every single thing she had to buy for us. Everything. Food, clothes, medical expenses, toys, laptops and phones, school costs, everything. We always knew exactly how much we were costing her. We didn't dare ask for unnecessary things like leisure activities or expensive toys or hobby supplies. We started working very young, and she manipulated and guilted us to give her all the money we earned to pay off what we owed. When I turned 18, she completely cut me off financially, but kindly offered to let me rent my bedroom out from her, and sent me an invoice of every cent I've ever cost her, totaling over $700,000. She billed me for Christmas and birthday presents. She even billed me for her medical expenses for the pregnancy and delivery, and wanted me to back pay rent to live in the house from birth. She did the same to my sister 2 years later when she turned 18. We were supposed to pay her back over time, starting the day we turned 18. Both of us were still dealing with a lot of internalized guilt from her constant manipulation, so we actually did pay for a while. Aside from necessary expenses, our entire paychecks were going to her. We rented our bedrooms in her house, and she separated her food, cleaning supplies, cookware, and tableware, etc., from ours and charged us to use them. She generously included the use of the household appliances in our rent. It wasn't until I was 21 and my sister was 19 that enough people had told us this whole arrangement was unhinged that we finally snapped out of it. We moved out together and have stopped paying our mom or even contacting her at all. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.